after our podcast last time, unfortunately, we talked about this off camera, but you mentioned that you want to get rid of all of your money. Like when you die, you're not going to pass it on to your kids or anything.
Yeah.
There's a pledge or something for that?
Well, I mean, there's the giving pledge, but, you know, we already donated our states have already been set up to be given away. I haven't signed any pledges for it, but yeah. And it's, I mean, well, I guess we're going to get into it. So, it's just that like so I'll tell you a really interesting example that'll drive this home. This was recent. So my great grandfather was, he was a ruler in Iran prior to, the Shah. And so we were like, I'm directly descendant from him. Now that sounds fancy. It doesn't mean anything, which is going to prove my point. He had 400 children. From those 400 children was my great grandfather. He was one of 19. Then there was my grandfather, then there's my dad, and then there's me, right? And so he was a ruler of a country. So you talk about like wealth and status and everything, right? I actually can't even remember his name. And so that's just 5 generations. And so the idea that we have of like, I want to like create a legacy. It's like, dude, you're not making a legacy. He was ruler of a country. I can't even remember his name. I'm related to him. Right. And so, you know, if you do that enough times, it just becomes humans. Right. Like the difference, and that becomes a very like humanitarian perspective too, because if you mix bloodlines enough times, it's just people, right? And you take your genes, split them, you do it 10 times, you know, half to the 10th power is very, very small number, right? In terms of what percentage of it is still you, if you still have like pride in your biology being passed on, which also gets into like having children versus not having children, because then that's a whole nother like interesting can of worms. But as a result of that kind of thought process, the point of leaving a legacy in like capital L legacy of like, this is going to last past me doesn't really make sense, because the people who I'm leaving it to will never know who I am. And it will get divided so many times as well between all of those people. It would have to be such an insane amount of money, which then would become a marginal amount of money once it's divided enough times. So for both of those reasons, it wouldn't work. But then on the close-knit basis of like, well, I want to pass it on to my direct descendants, I just don't know many people who have been given lots of money who are better for it. And so for that reason, it doesn't seem very beneficial to anything to give it to anyone besides just giving it back to everybody else. And it's also kind of nice because it kind of relieves you of this pressure, because then it's just realizing it for what it is, which is it's just a game, right? Like what we're playing right now is just a made up game to keep us occupied. And so these are just I gave the casino analogy at the end of the last podcast, but that is how I see it. It's like, we're just accumulating chips. They're fake and I can't take them with me. So I'm just pushing them back to the middle of the table, which is what they're going to be done anyways. It's just whether you say like, they're only going to these players rather than all the players. But like fast forward 3 more generations, it is all the players and you don't know the people anyways. Yeah. So like, what does it really matter?
Do you want kids? You mentioned, you know, the time commitment of a dog.
Yeah.
You're like, well, you know, it's too much. I can't imagine a child.
Yeah. I think I would probably have different feelings about a child than I would about a dog. And just so the audience can dislike me, so this is my gift for everybody. We had a dog, and it just went to the bathroom like 8 or 10 times a day, and it was too much. It was too much.
Outsource that? Couldn't you?
I could have.
Did you care for the dog?
Like, oh yeah, I actually really like animals, and actually animals really like me. It's kind of weird.
Bailey goes crazy when you get in the house.
But like it's like Layla's like, you have calming energy or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know, but like animals do like me, and I like them back. Like we're cool. Like we get along. But maybe it's because they know that I'm like, I don't need them.
They know you, but you don't need them.
You know, like I was like, you're an animal, I'm an animal. We're both just like doing our own thing. Like I don't need to take care of you. You can take care of yourself.
You know what? You need a cat though.
I loved the cat I had. We had a cat and it died after 2 years. But cats were way easier. So dogs versus cats, like I like the cat. Goldfish would work, you know, whatever. Yeah. But anyways, back to the kid thing. It's something I've given a ton of thought to. The pros for me of having a child are the human experience which is just like, this is a part of the human experience that is unique, and I think that would be interesting to go through. That being said, going to prison is also part of the human experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that I should do it. You know, sometimes people are like, I think you and Layla would make great parents. And I'll say this, and I say this not as a pejorative statement to parenting in general, but I'm using an extreme example to illustrate a point, which is like, I could be, and this is not disrespectful to people who may have this job. Man, culture these days. So if I could also probably be a really good gas station attendant, right? I could probably be really exceptional at that. It doesn't mean that I should do it. And so just because I might be an exceptional parent doesn't mean I should. And I think that there's in the cons column, there's a tremendous amount of risk personally that the person doesn't want to do what I want them to do. Right. And so the fact that I still have this desire that I'm projecting on an unborn child is something that I'm not very comfortable with, because like, if I had one, I would have a hard time saying that I want them to be their own person. I'd want them to be who I want them to be. And so maybe that is the learning of becoming a parent, is that you unlearn the expectations and projections that you have on the child. But in terms of like my personal like fulfillment component, I would rather like, I'm very torn about it. But there's so many guys that I've like mentored that have taken steps toward me and been like, please help me with business. Please help me in these ways. And I'm happy to. And, you know, if I had to trade off, I think we were talking about dinners last night, but like the amount of time that a child takes, right? Let's say it's, I don't know, 4 hours a day, roughly. But in terms of like headspace and time
Probably
spent with
more.
them.
I don't know.
I was actually trying to be really aggressive with 4. I'm being really honest. I was genuinely being like really aggressive with 4.
I would imagine a child
Like
would be
8
like,
plus.
Well, I mean, I'm going to pay
12
help.
hours.
That's like, there's going to be help
even
for
then,
sure.
it's like helping the help.
At what
or the
age,
mental
though,
Let's say
too,
8.
because-
Let's say 8. Let's say 8
Okay,
hours.
yeah,
Okay.
fine.
8 hours.
So 8 hours a day. So full-time job, right? For the next 20 years. If I had a full-time job in the next 20 years, I could help 100,000 or 1 million people more than I could just 2 that just so happen to share my genetics that eventually would get diluted out to nothing.
Is that how you base your decisions?
I mean,
off how many people you can help?
Based
Yeah.
on
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's why, a lot of people want to have kids to give meaning to their lives, right? And as a corollary to this, whenever I see a lot of people doing something, I don't think, oh, that's a great idea. I think, oh, that's a great path to mediocrity. And again, that's going to insult most people because most people do it. So this, again, it doesn't have to just apply to children. You can think about it for everything, which is like, if you're trying to not be in the majority because you don't want to be average, then it means that you have to, by definition, not do what everyone else is doing. And so when people are like, I'm taking this action to have children, I would assume that it's probably selfish, because you can always count on people to be selfish. It's not like humans only in this one instance are selfless, right? They're selfish because they want to look at it and be like, it looks just like me. That's why I love it. You're just like me, right? I love you. I love me, right? like, and I know, and like, I'm aware of that, right? And so that's why I'm like, I try and audit. Do I want to have kids just because I want to look at a version of myself? You know what I mean? But then I'm also going to project on this kid's life when he might want to be a ballet dancer or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with being a ballet dancer, but if I'm going to spend 8 hours, it's just like, I don't feel like I'm providing a lot of value. You know what I mean? And like, in terms of,
But it sounds like you're thinking of it from an ROI perspective.
Totally.
Like, I'm going to invest all this and I might not get a good ROI compared to the guaranteed ROI I could get 8 hours a day over here.
of helping other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really ROI of like the world.
Yeah.
More so than me particularly. There was a brief moment where I like had an injury where I thought I wasn't gonna be able to have kids. My nut turned black and I was like, oh, it was fine. But I was like very worried.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting is that during that period of time before I got it looked at, I just was like, I'm not gonna be able to have kids. Like, that's it, right? I'm screwed. Right. And what was weird is that I ended up I became so humanitarian in general. Like during that, like it was like all of my legacy, have kid, like the desire to progenerate went from being specific to a child to general to everyone. Because like when you realize you can't have a child, then you want to still pass it on. And I think that's just like a human desire, right? Of benefiting the tribe, whatever. But like you still had this desire, and rather than being able to get my fulfillment out of one child doing that for me, it's like I was forced to just be like, well, I have to just give to everybody. And so I think that was actually a really transformative experience for me. And I think it's part of what has shaped a lot of like the thoughts around giving today in general.